Hey everybody, and welcome to my Psychology 101 1-hour report. So today we'll be looking at the article titled The Influence of Prohibitory Voice on Proactive Personality Traits of Extroversion, Conscientiousness, and Neuroticism. So just having a look at the aim here, the study was actually undertaken to determine the effect of one's level of extroversion, conscientiousness, and neuroticism, which from here on in we can kind of call ACN just because it's an easier abbreviation for us all. And what effect these levels of ACM would have on their prohibitive voice or prohibitory voice, interchangeable terms. So the researchers hypothesized that high levels of extroversion and conscientiousness would be positively related with prohibitive voice, while levels of higher neuroticism would have an inverse relationship. And in the study itself, this was actually broken down into two separate hypotheses, just to make things easier. The fact that extroversion and conscientiousness would lead to a greater chance of utilization of prohibitive voice, while the other hypothesis was that neuroticism would lead to less use of prohibitive voice. So when we're talking about prohibitive voice or prohibitory voice, what are we talking about? Now, this image is what I kind of had in mind when I first started reading the article, and probably what you have in your mind. Kind of telling kids, no, you can't do this, or telling your colleagues, no, straight out like that. It's actually not quite as simple as that. So we'll have a bit of a greater in-depth look at what it actually means further on the slides. So what I got here is a much more contextual definition of prohibitive voice, and this is really what we're talking about when we refer to it. So as explained here, it's employees' expressions of concern about work practices, incidents, or employee behavior that are harmful to the organization and occur when employees evaluate and speak out about unresolved work problems. So hopefully this clears up the exact definition we want to be talking about. So now having a look at the participants. Participants consisted of 240 employees from a research and development department in an information technology corporation in China. Now, 85.7% of these were men and 14.3% of these were women. And we'll discuss this a little bit further down in the presentation. And also the ethnicity of most of the employees was Asian. Just a further note on top of this, 37% of the participants had results that were not usable in the study, so they were just omitted from the total sample. So now just having a look with some of the issues of this sample, as it can be seen, there's clearly a huge bias of men to women. Now, possible issues with this is some men might feel less likely, regardless of the level of conscientiousness or extroversion, to use prohibitive voice against women. And vice versa, some women might not want to use prohibitive voice with men so much just because they're uncomfortable. You have to have a look at the majority Asian ethnicity in the sample. This is just because some cultures value specific traits more than others, so it'd be good to have a more inclusive and diverse range of ethnicities just to get a right sample of the true population of the world. Some of the pros from this study actually is that the subset that this is taken from is all in the workplace environment. So just having a look at how the study was actually undertaken, basically what they did is they got the management of the participants to actually perform a questionnaire on each of the individuals to assess their level of prohibitive voice usage in the workplace according to the management. And then what happened is each individual participant then completed a 7-point Likert scale test in tangent with questions relating to neuroticism, conscientiousness, and extroversion to determine their actual level of trait. Now, some of the pros and cons of doing this is that it's actually a very easy way to systematically measure each participant's trait level. So this is very good for consistency in measurement and enhancing the comparability between each participant. So that's very convenient. But some of the problems with this is that individual perceptions of themselves come into play. So, for example, introverts may want to admit they're a little bit more extroverted because they don't want to be embarrassed about who they are. Some introverts are perfectly comfortable with who they are, but a lot of the time, people want to appear more confident than they actually are. And on top of this, of course, the management will have their own biased viewpoints. And another problem on top of this is that Likert, with using a Likert scale, one of the problems that comes into play is that Participants are not very likely to choose either end of the extreme, so this can often bias the measurement. The results. So actually to determine the results, a regression model was used, and we'll have a look at this soon. But also the length of time employees had been working with their leader or the management was actually accounted for. So this was taken out of the equation, which is fantastic. So we'll have a look if the hypothesis was accepted. So we can have a look here. The control variable, which was the time of the leader, was taken into consideration and had a negligible effect on prohibitory voice. So that's great. That was taken into consideration and factored out. While extroversion and conscientiousness, you can see, does have a positive correlation with prohibitory voice, and conscientiousness even more so with 0.22. This is both in line with the hypothesis, but it's just interesting to see that conscientiousness, according to the results, has a bigger effect than extroversion even does. Also, on top of this, neuroticism had an inverse relationship, which again was in line with the hypothesis, but this was at 0.31, so actually quite a large negative correlation. So now having a look at some of the strengths and weaknesses of the results, and one of the biggest positives is regression models are a fantastic way to show actual correlation between two variables. And I'm definitely no expert on statistics, but what we've got here is a little regression model in itself. And what it does is it plots a set of results against each other and basically uses a whole lot of complex mathematical, See, that's how bad I am at math. Calculations, that's it, to actually determine if there is a relation between the two. But one of the negatives of this is that there's a lack of qualitative data to describe the results. Therefore, kind of deductions have to be made just based on the figures and stats rather than actual descriptions from the results itself. Just